Warning: if ISIS is involved, if this man was addicted to gambling, please be sure we exercise wisdom in our response. I pray that this is domestic terrorism. This is in case it's not. I want to talk about the Las Vegas terror incident. Obviously, it took place October the 1st, and I'm commenting on this really late on or I should say really early on October the 4th. I want to first of all admit I am not an expert. I also am not a college-educated person, so take it for what it's worth. This is more of a layman who's had time to watch the news a lot and has self-educated himself. I may lack context on both Las Vegas, due to how raw it is, and the past that I refer to here, because I wasn't alive, and it is difficult to educate oneself in the past because we tend to focus on the tragedies and not enough on what led to those tragedies. However, I worry over what I heard October the 2nd and the 3rd for these reasons. One, the level of investment in both time and money to make this as massive a tragedy as possible. Two, the background of the shooter, Stephen Paddock. A, he did not appear to be someone of radical views. B, many references to his love of gambling. If it was an addiction, it's too early to say, really, but there appears to at least been a very heavy love of gambling, and high-stakes gambling at that. C, nothing in his past so far indicates what would drive him so fast into an extreme act. And D, his age also seems odd, since usually acts like this happens out of frustration. A feeling of helplessness, a feeling of being at the mercy of others and lashing out to hurt others in an attempt to regain some semblance of control. Yet this man was well established. He seemed successful. Like I said, it's still early. 3. ISIS has claimed now twice that there was involvement by them. And I want to know why. Many times terrorist organizations do claim responsibility, but in the past, ISIS has refrained from claiming every act as theirs. However, and also consider the fact that this is not a normal incident. It was an old white guy with money and a future. And he doesn't even have a radicalism when it comes to religion. And yet they're still claiming that he's involved, that they had a hand in it. So, however, they could be that media does not always report every time they do make a claim. So I admit this could be a case of I just lack information. Now, a bit of recent history. 9/11 was a massive shock in many cases. America reacted by passing many separate laws. Each one alone seemed reasonable. Yet, within less than a year, once you started listing all the things together on just one story in a newspaper, it became shocking to me. It clearly showed that we panicked as a group, that we fell into groupthink, and the apportionment of the changes were so individually and not made as a massive thing that we went way too far to cover all contingencies instead of just try to do this with wisdom. Since Trump announced his candidacy, the left has, 1, protest outside of venues where supporters before any violence on their part were subject to verbal harassment, even physical attack, pepper sprayed, hit, thrown, called vile names. Food has even been thrown at some. So, even some physical attacks. I remember at least one incident where a lock was thrown at someone and they left the place with blood coming out of their forehead. Amazingly enough, only a few on the right took the bait and hit back. intact. And even then, everyone went crazy and tried to point it out as proof that the right was the problem, even though it was clear with all of the provocation that it seemed to be relatively an understandable thing, that in the process of being around all that hate, they ended up, some of them took the bait. 2. Media in Washington, before and after the election, continued this narrative that Trump is dangerous. That they swore in a 4-way election that Trump could not win, even though no poll ever hinted this was leading to a landslide election. Not one of them, even though the commentary seemed to lead everybody to believe there was. Clearly, while they gave facts, their commentary had little to do with the actual polls or results during the primaries. I will leave in the proviso that if you all want to believe there's a collusion with Russia, they're still investigating. Have fun. I don't see how they can hack your all's brains, but if you do, have fun. 3. Many celebrities take any chance to make outlandish claims, calling for assassination or active resistance. 4. The left on campuses across the nation, from Evergreen College and Berkeley College, just an example of a few, the more extreme ones, has stayed silent, allowing students to violate civil rights, including the First Amendment. 5. Many in protest have labeled Trump supporters as neo-Nazis, even comparing Trump in some cases to Hitler. And I'm not necessarily saying media, because I don't know of any individual media person that has went that far and claimed it, although they've come close. All of this insanity, it is clear that many protesters, not Washington, not the media, I'm talking about protesters. They want an armed confrontation so they can say, see, we were right all along. He's a bad person. He's evil. The problem is Trump, while incredibly narcissistic, give you that one, clearly does not care who he offends. He still has yet to ask or even act like Hitler. Do you honestly believe, after nearly a year of insanity, that Hitler, or even the Nazi Party of the 1930s, would have tolerated this level of opposition after they gained power, when they had access to all the powers of government? And yes, you might say the military or the police might stand up. That misses the point. All the provocation, and yet he has not yet to even try to access and order military action against you all. And believe me, I have no doubt Hitler would have. I went into all of this to make a point. Except for Charlottesville, even the radical right, like white supremacists, KKK, have yet to react, and they are not what I would call the most docile of people. Easily they can overreact, and yet they haven't yet. With all the provocation that you've given, they have stayed calm. So, my question is, for you, how much longer can you expect this to continue? Now, I'm going to go back to Las Vegas. One thing I think we can be safe in saying is the shooter is not a rabid radical. If there is a motive at the moment, the best one might be a gambling problem. Now, I'm going to give a theory of what could end up being the case. And again, it is a raw theory. What if he wanted a big fix in his gambling addiction? Going out on a high gambling note. Everything at its highest. And then when he has lost hugely, he is ready to commit suicide by cop. Can you imagine how big a blow it would be to morale if this man did it for money? If ISIS bankrolled him? Maybe they would have a huge propaganda win, a victory along with a major attack on U.S. soil. They can point out just how morally corrupt the West is when someone not a believer, actually someone that believes in the West, is willing to sell out everything they believe in just for money. I heard today some talk that this may have been planned earlier at another concert. Some talk about renting out properties around another concert venue, and it didn't happen. I don't know how much. It was just a couple of incidents that I heard, and I don't even remember where I heard that. I'm just mentioning it. So it is clearly iffy. At best, I mention it because this man is clearly not a fanatical believer. Once he got his high, maybe he woke up and realized he really couldn't do it. It was insane. After he got his fix, just like most people that have an addiction, they tend to wise up for a few seconds there until it gets worse again. The first time might have had to be canceled because he wouldn't do it. He wasn't insane enough to do it. If so, maybe those cameras that we are hearing about were meant to make sure he followed through. Maybe they're a two-way camera where people were looking to make sure he actually did what he said he would do. We just don't know yet. There's just not enough information out there, and again, all of this is a theory. I am not saying any of this is likely. I'm worried about what is going to happen afterwards, and that is what I'm addressing here. I pray to God this is simply domestic terrorism. A sick man alone we can still heal from. What I fear is that at some point the right is going to have its fill of all of the antagonism they've been getting from people on the street, like Berkeley and other incidents where they're attacking free speech or attacking someone's hat. So at some point there's going to be a backlash. And I fear if this is what I think it might be, Washington will go insane, reacting instead of staying calm, just like they did in 9/11. And McCarthyism and the Japanese internment camps. And again, I don't have enough background on that to know how we got to that point, just that it happened. That is why I desperately want to know what was the atmosphere in World War II that made it sensible to intern Japanese Americans, or in 1950s McCarthyism, that he became so popular, because there's a reason behind it, and I think that's very important, and we could be very near recreating a certain circumstances that will send us going crazy again. But I really don't know enough. Once the dam breaks at the right and the right decides it's had enough, then the protesters might find out they've been creating their own worst nightmare, and mine as well. And America, this generation, will have a new shameful memory that in the future our ancestors will say about us what we say about those that decided Japanese internment camps or McCarthyism made sense. The blame will be placed on the right, because that's where the tragedy happened. Because society never focuses on why things happen, only on the results. They, like us, may end up no wiser, and someone, like me, will desperately try and discover how it came about and won't have the time to weed through to find the triggers in all the information on the event that will be covered, but won't even touch or barely touch on what led up to it, because they won't think it's important. Again, I pray all of this is wrong. I'll wake up tomorrow and we will know for sure it's domestic. But even that, I want to ask those protesters out there, you need to start thinking, what happens if you do successfully trigger Trump or the KKK or whatever group that you end up triggering, and they go to the extreme that you're hoping that they will go to? And how will it be interpreted by the public? Because your protests are meant to get a point across, and I want to know if you're aware of the point that you're leaving many people that are only seeing you acting at moments a little deranged on things such as freedom of speech? Are you aware of this look? Are you sure the response that you're going to get is going to be the one that you want if you do get Trump to act this way? Because I can tell you right now, what has come real clear to me is Trump has proven you wrong. He has shown patience well beyond what any dictator would with the activity those youth have engaged in. Eventually, Trump will be forced, but are you sure afterwards the public won't be saying, about time? I don't want to see that happen. I'm just trying to warn you here. Think long and hard, because you've already started to lose this argument. You needed a confrontation, and you only got one, Charlottesville. And even that didn't have the effect you wanted. I love this country. I love its institutions. As racist as you think those institutions are, they were the best the world has seen so far. Now someday a new set of wise leaders will reach beyond themselves that will not be this generation, because I'm not aware of any wise leaders out there right now. The Constitution I hold with high respect. My generation, including myself, are clearly not worthy of the inheritance we received and the one we're squandering for the next generation. We gain so much just by accident of birth, and we care so little for it. Right and left is willing to use every last ounce of what we have and willing to let children and future children suffer while they wait for some new wise leaders that can reach beyond their petty selfish wants and desires to recreate what my generation threw away. I can't be proud of people like that, including myself, since I'm part of that generation. But I will always be proud of the institutions and the founders who reached deep in themselves to try and create something that can stand the test of time. Even if they fail, at least they reached beyond themselves to do that. I don't hold out hope. My generation, or the two behind me, or I should say two in front of me, will value any of this. I will hope for the best, that those we place our faith in as role models will eventually rise to the occasion. But I honestly don't see anyone, whether media, Washington, or celebrities, that is deserving of any child wanting to be emulated. In other words, I don't know why any child would want to emulate anybody in Washington, or celebrities, or even NFL people. I'm sorry, I just don't know why you'd want to emulate any of them. Sadly, the only role models it seems this world can come up with are the ones teaching us how not to live. Basically the anti-role model. But even if the United States citizens fail to see beyond their own selfish desires, I have confidence something better will replace it. I just pray it will not take too long after we lose. My generation deserves all we get. Sadly, we will be too old to pay the price in blood that will be the generation being born today that will probably end up paying the heaviest price in blood. I say all of this because we have fallen so far, so fast, in 5 years, and I'm not sure if we have reached bottom yet. You can only put off bad things so long. You might die before the bill comes due, but someone will have to pay the bill eventually. You might get lucky, but if you've got children, think about them for a change. It might be nice. Thank you.